see you all tonight. It was easier to do this here than in our living room. I would have been nice to have you all over. It wasn't a fit. So this is a treat. Pam and I are really, really blessed for having been able to be a part of the, back there at the dawn of Taproot Theater, like March 9th, 1976. So on my calendar, so our birthday comes up here in just another couple of weeks. And so that, almost 44 years down the road now, it's really pretty astonishing. Theaters have about as much likelihood of surviving as bad restaurants. And even good theaters hit really rough spots and crash and burn. So that the fact that Taproot Theater is still here is a credit to people like you. I see people who've been around here since the dawn of Taproot, George. And Carol, I think, was here. Carol, one of the other co-founders. I saw Carol Gibson. Oh, she's in the dark. Sorry, Carol, I couldn't see you up there. And so that there's just been a lot of history here. And so, in terms of kind of putting a couple things together, part of this was you get to sit through 1,400 slides on my trip. I've tried to take only the best 1,400. That's a good thing about a cell phone. You can take digital photos and they're still there. And I have uploaded them to the cloud, so now I can watch them anywhere. But it is a really interesting thing to kind of back away and try to capsulize what that experience was and how it helped seed my thinking in terms of what was next and where Pam and I were in terms of trying to chart the next third of our life. So roughly the agenda is I'm going to talk about the Camino. And actually I have some comments there in terms of how the Camino then feeds into my thinking, and I will speak on behalf of the organization as we think about 2021 and beyond. And then Pam and I will be up here for a Q&A to talk about anything you want to know about, well, within limits. Both in terms of what does our next phase look like, and what is, how does that work into what Taproot's doing, and if you have a question about the Camino, I'm available. I'm a cheap date here real soon. In terms of I'll be a life coach on Camino things. So let me say, first of all, the history of the Camino of Santiago caught my attention. I was in León, Spain in 1996, and I was teaching outside of León. And back in the city of León, outside of the gargantuan, gorgeous Gothic cathedral, I saw some people with backpacks. And so I asked my Spaniard friends, are these people hitchhiking around the country? And they went, no, peregrinos. And I had no idea what that meant, but it was clearly condescending. Whatever it was not a lot of approval. Flash forward to 2011, and I was listening to an interview with Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez, his son. Martin Sheen's real name is Ramon Gonzalez.
Estevez.
Estevez, part
Yes.
And he was born in Spain. And so that Emilio directed a film called The Way, and Martin Sheen was in it. And it was about Martin Sheen finding out that his son, played by Emilio, an estranged son had died somewhere in France or in Spain. It's unclear. Can you come to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France and reclaim the body? So he gets there, and he finds out his son was going to walk the Camino de Santiago. No idea what this is. But he decides on the spot to take his son's ashes and walk the trail on behalf of his son. Well, when he got to León, and I'm watching the film now, when he got to León, I went, that's who those guys were. Oh, now I understand. And so then it all sort of fell into place, that that's who these people were, that's what they were doing. I became a bit of a nerd on Camino books, so I probably read 14 memoirs. Some of them are over here. Actually, this whole table is sort of the props for the show. So my pack is there, one of my hiking poles is there. I managed to break one of them tonight. So one is there. tonight versus on the trail. There's a bunch of other stuff that you're welcome to kind of look at. But anyway, after watching The Way, and then I read a book called The Way is Made by Walking. And it was a seminary professor outside of Toronto who hiked the Camino and then sort of wrote his memoir, but it was also sort of a devotional of what he learned along the way. And so from that point on, like I said, 12, 14 books later, I was convinced that this is something I'd really like to do someday. And in the fall, August, September of 2017, Pam said, in light of this desire and in light of just my own thought process on how many more years do I have in me to lead Taproot Theater the way it should be led, Pam said, well, this is the time for you to go do the Camino. And so that over here on the right-hand side, this was on my phone, counting down for about 9 months. And so right here in 1 second, I'm actually on the airplane. And so I managed to freeze it there and do a screenshot, so I've got that forever. And it's something, anyone who's taken a dare or a trip knows that there's sheer trepidation. Like, what have I gotten myself into? And so this is sort of too late to turn back. But this was the beginning of my trek. So I think I only have like 25 slides. So. Can I go for it? Nope. Let's try it again, Scott.
I'm good for 15 slides.
There we go. So, a little bit of history. This is St. James, the brother of Jesus. And tradition holds that he traveled all the way to Spain to preach. And then when he got back to Jerusalem, he was beheaded. And his disciples, eventually took his body back to Spain and buried it basically in the land that he loved. And so that supposedly in the 8th century, his body was found in a cave on the coast, and he was covered with scallop shells. And then a shrine was built shortly thereafter, and it became a holy site for the Roman Catholic Church. So this is actually, and then other legends have that St. James appears on horseback to fight the Moors, to get them to retreat from Spain. And you can't really tell, but these are all darker skinned individuals. And so this particular statue at one point was removed because it had racist overtones. So it sort of goes back and forth, but it is part of the legend. Of course, it's not likely he appeared on a horseback with a sword. But it is part of the legacy of St. James being the defender of Spain. Over on the other side there, starting at about the 10th century, Santiago de Compostela became a place for pilgrimages. By this point, Jerusalem was not a safe place to travel to. And so if you're going to demonstrate your holiness and your devotion, you did a pilgrimage. And in this case, Santiago de Compostela, to go to the place where St. James is buried, was a site that was essential. It was, let me see if in my next slide will show you. I'll explain this. But there are trails from all over Europe that connected to Santiago de Compostela. And it was a place where you could go, you get, actually you get sanctioned to, I don't know how many credits you get with the Pope, but I got one. And the path was defended by the Knights Templar. How cool is that? And I was in several churches that were clearly built by the Templars because they're made defensible so that they could shoot arrows out from the side of the altar. This is sort of a cheater thing because there are two places where you can go and actually to witness the relics of St. James. One is in a crypt below this chancel area, and there's a silver casket down there that supposedly holds the bones of St. James. Also, there's a stairway. This is like a high altar, so this is gargantuan. So there's a staircase that goes up about 8 feet or so to a platform that cuts down the other side. And you can cut up behind here, And right there, you can't tell, but that's someone's hand. So you go up behind there, and you're there to embrace the statue of St. James and to kiss the back of the statue, and you get like another point. So I don't have a picture of me doing that because that's not possible. But the person I was with, I got a picture of her doing this, and it's very peculiar. But this is not my photo, but it's like, yeah, there we go. That's what you do. You get behind there. If I go back there for a second, this is a traditional pilgrim. And so this staff right here, there's usually a gourd that they use for a water bottle. And going back, like I said, to 10, 11, 12 centuries, they're wearing like, leather moccasins and a cape to stay dry and some kind of a floppy hat. And I had a space age aluminum backpack, and I had a bladder thing that was in my pack, so I had water that I could suck on, and I had like nutrient stuff that I could drink as I walked for 6 or 8 hours a day. This is astounding. So to be able to walk all those kilometers and be at risk of being robbed or beaten or killed along the way is pretty amazing. Right here, you'll see there's a scallop shell. There's a scallop shell of it. So that really is the symbol of St. James, and it is one of the things you watch for to make sure you're on the right trail. Let's see, we got here, there's St. James. Okay, so this is how many trails. Here's St. James Compostela, or Santiago de Compostela. This is in French. So this is where you're hiking to. I started right about there. So the other side of the Pyrenees. And then that's my trail right there. But there are 2 trails up here. One's called the Primitivo, one's the Norte. This is the Portuguese route that cuts out from there. There's 2 coming out of Madrid. There's one that comes out of Malaga, somewhere down here now. There are 20 trails in Spain. And all of them feed over to Santiago de Compostela. I read a book by a woman who started clear over here. I met a man who started in somewhere up here in Holland. So he had walked all the way there. I met people who walked there and now were on their way back. And so literally they kind of, take the ice cube trays out of the fridge and put them in the sink so they melt. Everything's empty, turn off the power, lock the door, and just start walking. So it's really pretty astounding. There's another trail down here which is very popular that goes all the way to Rome. And Timothy Egan, who's a Seattle writer and has won Pulitzer Prizes, he's a New York Times writer. He just wrote a book called Journey to Eternity. I think that's right. And it's his journey from up here in Cambridge. You can't see Cambridge is somewhere over there. So he walks from Cambridge all the way to Rome. And he takes a bus and gets a train a couple times when his feet are bad. But otherwise, he does this other Via Valencia, something like that. Yeah, right. He did it the long way. I did this one here. This again is just a close-up of my trail. So I started right about in there, across the Pyrenees, and then end up over here. This is me on day 1. I'm still smiling. It was going to rain this day, so I am wearing my down jacket, and I'm ready for anything. When I say across the Pyrenees, it's not like crossing the Cascades, because we think of rocky, craggy mountains, the Alps, or something like that. So I'm on. This is my trail right here, and so I'm going to go up through there and over. And for a while, I wasn't sure why we had all the orange poles. Well, people die here. I found out when I got back home that the month before I did this, there was a whiteout and a snowstorm. So you literally are watching for these orange poles so you can have one and then see the other and keep going. This group I was talking to when I got back, they were stuck in the snowstorm and they were trying to decide whether to try and find their way back or do we still try to move forward. And because there was a group in front of them that they could see that had a guide, they stuck with, but they followed that group, they joined that group and made it across. In the film The Way, Emilio Estevez basically falls off the side here. He fell crossing the Pyrenees and that's how he perished. And that's a long ways down. You can't really tell. They're beautiful rolling hills, except they're steep rolling hills. And so there's a long ways down to the bottom here. On the other side of this, on the Spanish side, I started running into 4x4 posts that were numbered. So it was a number of post 61, and then it had a number down here. I had no idea what it was. Eventually I realized that it's sort of like the European 911. So just the same, if you had an emergency on the trail, you could dial 911. I'm at post 61, and they would send a small ATV out to rescue you. I had some leg tremors on the other side of this pass, and we passed a young Korean woman who hadn't been eating and hadn't been drinking, who was sort of sitting by the side of the trail and trembling, and not particularly coherent. So we convinced her to start drinking water and gave her a couple power bars, and we did see her then later that day, but for a while it was like, we don't see this woman by 6 o'clock, we need to send somebody up the trail. This is a bad day on the trail. So what's not to like? Walking down a trail, cutting through a medieval town, and you can't see it, but then cutting out on the other side. So that really you get up at 6:30 in the morning, you put your shoes on, you start walking, say 9:30, 10 o'clock, you're in another village, you stop for a cup of coffee and maybe tortilla, which in Spanish sense is more like a quiche or something. It's a heavy potato dish with a lot of egg, but it's very filling. Or you can get tostada, which means toast, and a cup of coffee, a café con leche. And then you do that at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then you start walking again, find a place to stay about 2 o'clock or so, go inside, get a bed, do your laundry, take a shower, find something to eat, talk for a while, go to bed, repeat. That's just sort of the stuff. Your job is to get up in the morning, walk all day, find a place to sleep, walk all day. That is what you do day in, day out. And I don't have any pictures of the rainy days. I won't show those to you. But probably a quarter of the days, the first couple of weeks, it was raining and it was windy. It was really cold. So I had one hypothermic day that was kind of nerve-wracking, but it was just the one. And again, that's me, and I am wearing what I'm wearing right there. So I might as well wear my uniform. I didn't have a badge though.
No need to.
But it looks a little wet, so this just goes over the hill there. And I'm walking somewhere between 20 and 40 kilometers a day, depending on how far I need to go. This is actually, again, where it all began. So that's in Leon, Spain. And I managed to get there. This is actually almost halfway across the country at this point. And I saw people here who I had not seen since like the first or second day. And you find out all of a sudden who speaks English because they're talking to you now. That's really quite amazing. We saw all kinds of terrain. This here was a really seriously bad day. As you can see, there is no tree cover. And so this was just a stinking hot day. The payoff was the place I stayed was on this ridge here. So when I got up in the morning to leave, looking down on everything, all the valleys below me were filled with this fog. And the sun has come. The photo looks better on mine, but it was just a glorious sunrise to see all this filled in. And I'm sort of on the top of the ridge, working down. And this is Osabrero. So Kay has done this hike. So that's Osabrero, and that's actually the trail up to Osabrero. This was such a long, hot, bad day. I got to the top, and probably 4 kilometers before I was done for the day, I came across a little place, and I got a big, tall, fresh squeezed lemonade and a beer. I was just so hot. I sit here for a while, and I don't need anything to eat, but I'm just hot. I'm going to take a break. The terrain does change from walking across some of those fields. We walk through vineyards, walk through acres and acres of like pink flowers, wheat, all kinds of just absolutely gorgeous. On my screen, this is a little bit oranger than what you can tell right there, but it's all the different changes in the soil. And you can see here, this looks like a big road. And there are times when we went through the woods and the trail was you know, this wide, and I'm brushing myself on tree branches, and then you get into open spaces like this, where it's wide open. That picture back of me walking by myself, I had lots of times where, see, there's somebody in the distance there, and I think there's going to be somebody up there. There are a lot of times when there are just barely anybody in sight. And then at other points where there's that many more people who have joined the Camino sort of along the way. So you start having not more companions directly, because there's not a lot of chat going on, but you can be a little bit more in sight of each other. But for my purposes, hitting the trail and having a lot of time to walk with myself and to think, to reflect, to be prayerful, these were just marvelous, marvelous days. And I hiked a lot with a fellow from Hayward, California, and a woman from Malaga, Spain, and a woman from Argentina. And in different combinations, the four of us, or two of us at a time, there's very little talking. It's sort of like you're really in a space where the Camino is your own journey. It is really there for your benefit. And so if you want to say, I'm going to keep on walking, or I'm going to stop here for a while and have a cup of coffee, I'll see you in the next village, I need to walk by myself for a while, you got carte blanche to do that. There's no expectation. It's just sort of the unspoken truth that if you need your space, that's what this is for. You zip back ahead. And so this is closest to what I felt was close sort of in the beginning in the Basque country, and then in the Galicia region, which is closer to where Santiago de Compostela is. The terrain and the vegetation was so close to the northwest. So this is, the real picture is that much larger in terms of just the expanse of these trees and the ivy and the moss, ferns. It felt very, very much like home. And that is actually one of my friends hiking there that I was able to use as a model for that. And so I started on May 25th, and this is me arriving then at Santiago de Compostela on June 25th. And so that is my fast selfie having just arrived. And this is the cathedral on the right-hand side there. It is huge, really, really glorious. And I'm afraid that my little video insert is not going to work. But part of what the cathedral is famous for is this thing right here. This is an incenser, which is probably about that tall. And right here, there are 7 or 8 priests at the base of this rope. And it sort of feathers out like this, so everybody's got a rope. And so one guy comes over and pushes, and it goes that direction, and they let it slack, and then as it goes by you, they pull it down, and it hoists it way up, and then they give it slack, and it goes. And it swings, I'm going to guess, probably 100 feet across the whole, I mean, it's a cathedral, so it's shaped like a cross. So it goes way the heck, all the way across here, and it moves really fast. And they have filled it full of incense, and so that it is really, really spectacular. The first time I was there with the gal from Argentina, they didn't do this. The next day I was there with my friend from California, and they did do it. And so you're not supposed to have cell phones out. Please don't take any pictures. But none of us spoke Spanish. Everybody's doing it. And actually there's the statue of St. James, and there's probably somebody behind it right now hugging him. The month after we were there, I saw in the newspaper that some of the choir boys, or the little altar boys that help with things, this thing, they had substituted marijuana. And so they have the hot coals in there, and they dumped an incense in there that had been heavily loaded with pot. So the holy smokes. So they were caught, and they were, I don't know if they were in jail or not, but it's a great story. This thing goes back, but it's really, really pretty spectacular. And they don't do it all the time. I heard that you know, if we pitch enough money, we can, you know, bribe the priest to do it. So I don't know how we did it. There were dignitaries there or something. For the sake of, some people say like, well, where do you stay? This is one view of an albergue. So this is my bedroom with, I think there are 8 bunk beds in this room. I think there's 8. Well, no, there's 8 bunk beds in this room, and I slept with as many as the low side. I think there were 2 bunk beds. High side there were probably 40 or so in one room. And so that you learn very quickly how to have a lot of grace with each other and give everybody personal space. And I will say that the ethic among the peregrinos, the pilgrims, is really high. And so I never saw anything that was uncomfortable or intrusion on personal space. And you get used to you being discreet, that everybody would go take a shower, and that's the point when you're going to change clothes or come back. I think there was one point, not this place, there's one place where there was like a naked guy standing over there facing the wall changing for some reason. I figured he was German. That's the only time it's sort of like, we're just odd. Just little corners. But the sleeping arrangements, it's men and women. Sometimes the restrooms are men here and women there. Most of the time it's just blended. It's just, you know, top floor doors, and so it's very, very private. But like I said, again, the ethic among the peregrinos just really is superb in terms of the treatment of each other. Everybody knows this is hard. Everybody knows you're going to get up at 6:30 in the morning, put on your shoes, and do this all over again. Everybody does. Almost everybody's going to get blisters. Almost everybody's going to get sick. Everybody's going to get cold. Everybody will have doubts, why the world am I doing this? And so the spirit of cooperation is really very high. I included this because many of the places we went to, they would have a pilgrim's service. And the priest would call any of the peregrinos forward for a blessing. So the priest is over here in the back row, and I think the only English he knew was how to call for Americans. That's it. Everybody else, everything else was in Spanish. He had no English, but we gathered in this part of this cathedral to read the Lord's Prayer in our languages. And then he had us line up, and he held each person's head between his hands and pronounced a blessing on each one at a time. And you know, he does this daily for 8 months or more. And so his individual attention and his commitment and how he talked to each of us was really pretty special. Really very, very nice. So that's me. This guy right here, you know, in the corner, that is Patrick. He's my buddy from California, who was in town this last summer, and he and his wife swung by. It's wonderful to see him. He wants to take another Camino, so that's happening. These people here are from France. I think he was Irish. This gentleman, I think, was from Taiwan. She's Portuguese. But I think in my other notes, I got at least 7 different countries here. And so that it's really pretty, it's a really eclectic group. And I think there were 200 national groups that were represented in my month, you know, traveling from St. Jean Pied de Port all the way to Santiago de Compostela. So 2 stories here. This is about my 3rd or 4th day into the hike, and I'm seated at a table. It'd be sort of like, you know, a folding table, but there were like 4 or 5 of them maybe, you know, end to end right here. And my bunk bed's upstairs, and I came down to look at my guidebook and figured out, like, well, is there anything in town I should go walk to? And where am I going tomorrow? What should I be watching out for? And over here, I've got about 6 German guys playing cards. And they are laughing, having a great time. It's really loud. And on the other side of there's a guy from Brazil who speaks Portuguese, and he's making a vegetarian pasta with red sauce and lentils, and he's got a bottle of wine he wants to share. a Chinese man sits down across from me with a plate with 2 hot dogs and 2 hamburger patties. And then I have 4 Japanese ladies over here. So I'm surrounded, all this, I was by myself. And now I have all these people. The Germans are having fun. The Brazilian guy wants to share his wine. This guy here wants to know if I want to have a hot dog or a hamburger. He can't speak English, but he's offering me his dinner. These ladies here wanted me to help cook their dinner. They're Japanese, no English. Microwave, Spanish, no English. So I need to figure out how to help them heat their microwave dinners in a microwave, which even the ones we took all of ours together, all of them would be different. So how do I figure out a Spanish microwave? Well, eventually I did get it to work. So we got to warm up their dinner. The Brazilian guy brought me his pasta. The Japanese gals knew wine, red wine, please help, soup. That's it. That's all we got. But by the time we got done there, I had one offer me wine, one offered me rosé, and the Portuguese offered me his red wine, and I still have pasta here, and I didn't have any soup. But it was, like I said, about maybe 4 days into the trip, and it was this sort of extraordinary experience that I think I just had dinner in heaven, because I can't understand anybody here, but they all want to share. The profound experience is everybody wanted to give something to somebody else. And the request for help was just so simple. And it was really, really extraordinary. These Japanese ladies were later on patron saints to my friend Melissa right here, because she got stomach sick in another albergue, and they had Japanese, whatever it was, to kind of help her with her stomach sickness. These 2 gals here, she's from Malaga, she's from Argentina. And this place here, they invited us to come down, so we were spending the night here in albergue. Like, albergues are just a little bit less fancy than hostels. But it was a community meal. So if you want to come down and make dinner, come on down, we're going to do this at 6 o'clock. One woman spoke English, the cook did not. So we gathered in the other room and made this chorizo, potato, bell pepper, garlic, onion stew, and then ate it communally like this. And then all of us helped clean up. And it was just delightful. And I learned how to make a great soup. So this was not often to share making a meal, but it was just another one of those special experiences. We did this together, and we're very glad to be here. When you hike the Camino, you leave with like a passport. And so this gives you permission to stay in any of the albergues, which would be like a discounted place to stay. They are run by private parties, by the church, by the state government. And so the rate can run from free donativo in terms of whatever you want to pay, so up to like €5, up to fancy ones that are like 15 euros. But you have to have a passport. And every place you stay, every town, maybe every restaurant or bar you go to, you get a stamp. So that by the time you get to Santiago de Compostela, you turn this over to the officials, they take a look at it, and then you are issued your letter from the Pope, or in this case, the Archbishop of the Cathedral, which guarantees that I started in St. John, and I hiked 799 kilometers, and this is, I left the 22nd, but anyway, and I arrived on the 25th. So I was on the trail for 35 days, I had 3 break days. So I took a break in Pamplona, Leon, and Burgos. So those are my 3 rest days. But this then becomes sort of your certificate that says you really did it. And you can get this certificate if you start in the city of Sarria, which is like only 100 kilometers, but that's the minimum. You need to walk a minimum of 100. Like I said, I did with 799. And that's my seal of approval. Now, How do you know you're on the right trail?
So you get used to looking for both the scallop shell, which can show up as bronze things on the ground or tiles. You mostly end up looking for these yellow arrows. And they end up in the most random places. And so that, and some of them you can't see. So that this one is spray painted on a manhole cover, and then this one is on a rock wall. And you live or die by finding these. And if you don't follow the arrows, you're bound to get in trouble. So one day, I know I've got to walk about 32 kilometers today. I'm within probably the last 4 kilometers of where I need to go. So I got about this far to go. And there's an Albert over here on my left. And the trail goes, the road is going like this, the trail's going like this. And so I follow the trail, take off to the left, and everybody's over at the Albert waiting at me. And I'm going, I wait back. And I kept going, and I got to my town, and there's not even a dog there. There's nothing. And there should be a place to stay. And I walked the whole town, I didn't see anybody. There's not it was sort of like the zombie apocalypse. There's nobody here. And then I see in the distance all these dark clouds coming in, and that's when I started to get nervous. So I have a Spanish weather app that GPSes where you are. So I pulled it out, took a look, and the name of the town is not my town, not where I'm supposed to be. So then I look for my guidebook, get that out, and all those people who were waving hi to me were going. I took a turn, I should say. So that was my 40-kilometer day. And I did walk too far that direction, had to come back, and then continue going that way. But these are critically important. And I came back with a couple of those to have at home on the fridge and with my computer monitor at work, because the arrow became so significant. And I had a long conversation with a German guy, Osorero, which is this sort of Celtic mountain monastery on a ridge. And this German guy snagged me and came back with like 2 more barrels of beer. And he wanted to talk about whether I was religious. And I'll tell you what I said. I said, well, yeah. He says, well, I go to these places and it means something to me, and I don't know why. And his grandfather had been a soldier, a German soldier in World War II. He was captured by the Russians. He spent a lot of time in a Russian POW camp. He was released, went back home. He didn't go along with certain things that the eastern half of Germany wanted to do. He was thrown back in prison. He got out of prison, packed up the family, and moved west, except for the father of the guy I was talking to. He was a university student at that point and was on a bike trip with his buddy. The next week, the Berlin Wall went up. And my friend, Jens, did not meet his grandfather till the wall came down. So he was born, his dad, he was a college student when the wall went up. So, go ahead all those years. And so that when he finally met his grandfather said, we're going to church. And Jens was in the East German Army, raised in an atheist nation. He was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. You've been in the POW, two POW camps, basically. Been mistreated. Why in the world would we go do that? You don't believe in God, do you? And the grandfather was, of course I do. And so that was Jen's introduction to church, maybe having a voice in his life. And he wanted to know what I had to say. And I said, well, Jens, you know how we keep following these arrows? And I think that's sort of what faith is like. Is like, you've got to pay attention to the arrows and trust the next time you need wisdom or direction, you're going to find another arrow. And we had another beer and I didn't see him again. But there are so many interesting random discussions because I think virtually everybody on the Camino is there for a reason. At the beginning of the trip, you have to decide whether you're there for religious, spiritual, athletic purposes, or other. I think you have 4 choices. And, but for the most part, people who come any distance, like anyone from North or South America or from Asia, we're not going to do this for a week and then come back a while. You'll find a lot of Europeans who will take a week off work because they've got places to stay and come back next year and hike another 5 days. But people have come a certain distance. There really is a sense of purpose. And the conversations about why are you here, and it has something to do with a junction in life, something is changing, is really, really very apparent. And again, that's just a good day on the trail. And there are days like this where you're just, you really can watch the wind move the wheat on either side of you, and it's just like a moving picture of things going on. And so I think like I said, I left on the Camino pondering how many more years I had in me to lead the theater. So this is May, June of 2018. And came back resolved that, no, I think at the end of 2020 is about how much more time that I have. And it's a conversation that Pam and I have been having, though not as specific as what date would this be, but also like kind of coming to closure on what we're doing, what was next for us and for the theater. And I wanted to put this together. On the left-hand side, this is my Camino experience. I'm involved with this myth and this history and this calling to go out and do this every single day, get up and do it. This is my routine, and I'm committed to it. The journey, I've got a map, and I've got the discipline to get up every morning, put my shoes on. Is it rainy? Is it sunny? Is it windy? Am I hungry? It doesn't make any difference. You have to have the discipline to keep going. I'm surrounded by peregrinos who are out here who share the experience, who already understand that this is hard, but we're on the trail together. And we will help each other. The number of times I saw people sharing food or Band-Aids or medication or what to do about blisters, it's just the way humanity should operate. And lastly, this whole sense of the arrows. Pay attention. Are you on the right trail? If you're not on the right trail, find the right trail, because you're not going to get to Santiago de Compostela unless you're on the right trail. Look for the arrows. And my parallel for the theater was that we have got a mission and a legacy that it just keeps going. We know where we're going. We like our mission. We feel good about it. The board has said, yes, we like what we're doing. We're not looking to change anything at all. We are committed, and if Taproot Theater had a collective gift, it really would fall into this thing of perseverance. And it's like you hit hard patches, you hit struggles, and you have successes as well, but you persevere through all of those. And perseverance becomes so important. Where I was surrounded by peregrinos, I know that we are surrounded by a committed board, talented and committed staff, and by patrons, of which I mean sort of our extended family of subscribers, studio theater families, and donors. We are all in this together. And this whole notion then of arrows comes back to the kind of reflection that I and other leaders of the theater have said. Now, are we choosing the right play? Are we listening to the audience? Are we listening to this moment in history? Are we listening to the city to make sure we're on the right path to find the plays or the classes, whether it's plays there or plays here or plays in schools? Are we paying attention to the arrows so that we can consistently move forward? And it's, again, in terms of talking about the future, the board and I and the rest of the leadership said, we're not trying to reinvent Taproot Theater in 2021. We like our mission. We like the legacy of plays we have chosen. We like our audience. We know what we do well, and we want to continue building on that. And I am speaking on behalf of all of my buddies here, that it's like this is the continued direction of the theater. And I will say at this point, this whole sense of what's next, the board I notified the board in the fall of 2018 that this was my trajectory over the next 2 years. And so that the board knew they needed to understand my job description, not just from the task side of things. Because you can say, okay, direct a play, pick a play, you make a list of tasks. Do IT. That's the stupid part of the job. But what are the soft and subjective things that have to go with the judgment call of play X, not play Y? Or what are the judgment calls we make that are faith and values informed about the kind of things we want to be known for and how we want to treat each other, how we want to treat our neighborhood or city, the schools we deal with? What is sort of what's the character of the theater? So that's also sort of an extended conversation. And the board then started this last fall really knuckling down and trying to do the deeper research into looking around for my successor. So that has been the board's task. And I would say it's important to me that, I think I joked at the last executive committee meeting, that the board inherited me, I just didn't leave. And so that it's like, I've been there longer than you, but I never went. Well, now is a different point, where the board needs to choose my successor and develop a relationship and be committed to each other. So it's not just inheriting Scott, and I'm joking because I have more support than that sounds, but there's a relationship that needs to be formed that is mutually accountable and committed to each other. I want the board to be committed to my successor and to take care of my successor. So it's putting that in motion. And like I said, at the same time, the board doesn't want to do a hard left and be an existential minefielder or something else. No. I swear there are no striped shirts or berets except maybe in costume stock. I think we burned those. No more mine. So it's been a steady process. And something as important as this, it's slow and steady. It's slow, it's steady, and it's thoughtful. And so I know the board is looking towards wanting to be public with this process and this announcement, but they want to make sure they got it all lined up. So that's where people were nervous, like, well, who is it? I can't tell you today, because things really need to be put in. I have about a half a dozen board members here. I saw Scott, Noltes is right. George Scranton is there. There's Peter and Brian there. David Wood. Oh, there's David. Let's see. Is it George? Okay. And I have two former board members here, Steve Schertzinger and Carolyn Hansen. Steve's over there. Carolyn, I saw you come in.
Right here. He's right by Steve.
You're right here? No, aren't you up there? And like I said, Carol Gibson here, another past co-founder. So that there's just a lot of good thought going into this. So we appreciate your patience and your ongoing support and prayers too. So Pam is here as well because this affects both of us. It may feel like my I leave one kind of hole in the fabric of the theater. Pam does too. And so Pam, do you want to come over here? Maybe she doesn't.
Well, that's a question.
These are my friends. So I know that both of us wanted to also just kind of be able to take any questions that might have to do with the trajectory of the theater, or if you had questions in terms of what's next, or you want to ask me about that picture. We can answer any of those sorts of things. Like I said, I've got my props over there, so feel free to take a look at anything there. Take a look at my stage eight pattern. Any of you who are Boy Scouts in the 70s know that packs weighed about 30 pounds before we put stuff in them. And I think that weighs about 10 ounces. So it's just really very nice.
Scott, we're going to go ahead and do a microphone.
Excellent.
Mostly because we're recording this, we're going to put it on YouTube so others can see it, so we can hear your questions well. These guys know how to project.
So when Scott calls on you, give me just a minute to get to you before you actually ask the question. That way we're all on the same page.
You can pass
If
it
you don't
down.
have a question, this goes really fast. Any questions?
I think they're going to have lots of questions.
I don't understand kilometers.
Yeah.
So, on average, how many miles a day did you walk?
Oh, 15 to 20. I think that 40-kilometer day was closer to 30, 32 miles. 24.
0.6 is your divider.
Say it again?
0.6 is your multiplier.
Oh, there you go, thank you.
A kilometer is 0.6 of a mile, roughly.
Good, good. There you go.
Follow-up question.
Follow-up questions?
Before you went, how many miles a day were you walking?
In preparation.
How many miles did I walk a day in preparation? I tried to take a walk about 3 times a week, even for work, just sort of, and I had a tracking thing on my phone so I could walk 2 or 3 or 4 miles at lunch. I walked from Madison Park to Shoreline, Madison Park to Maple Leaf area. I didn't do enough of those long distance hikes, and I didn't do enough with my pack filled up. So I wish I had hiked with weight, more weight than I did. But my friend had said to buy shoes like a half size larger than normal, because your feet just you don't stop walking, so they flattened out and they swell, and so that you just need enough room for your feet to still fit in your shoes. And I think it was maybe 3 months before my feet fit back into regular shoes here at home. And they just
Any women who have been pregnant understand.
I don't know what that means.
So did you lose toenails?
The only day that I injured toenails, the first day hiking to Roncesvalles, crossing the Pyrenees, you go up like Queen Anne Hill for about 6 hours, and then you go down for about 2 hours. And it was going down that I wasn't hitting the toe of my shoe. I think it was actually my socks that were peeling back toenails. And so that I did lose a couple after I got home. But I could tell that I had a couple that were just looser than the shoe. I stepped on something one day and I got a bruise on the ball of my foot. And so that I had like that, and then I had a blister there as well. So the blister wasn't bad, but the bruise on the ball of my foot meant that I was putting more weight on my heel and keeping the front of my foot up. And so then that aggravated all the muscles from here to here. So that I got to one place and they had a masseuse on call to give free massage. And so that she wanted me to go stand in the river to ice my leg, and she agreed that it was pretty injured. The woman in charge of the albergue thought that was stupid. Don't go stand. Don't go stand. Sit down. And so she went and came back with like a wash tub with ice and water in it. So I put my foot in there, and then she disappeared, and she came back with a saw. So that was the way she was going to cure my foot. But she was a heck of a lot of fun. And so fortunately, I gave it back just as good as she could give it. So we got along famously. And I did get to Leon the next day, and I had friends there who spoke Spanish, and so I got like industrial strength ibuprofen over the counter that it'll make you all numb. All of us will be numb with one of these tablets. But that was very helpful. So one injury. Up there.
Scott and Pam, thank you for taking time to come talk to us about many things tonight, apparently. It's all good, but retirement, I think you used that word, means different things to different people. What's retirement going to look like? Let's ask Pam. What's it going to look like starting with you in 2020? What happens to Pam?
Oh, Scott. You know, I think there's so much that we don't know. We married at 19 and 20 years of age. I was the elder of those two. We finished our theater degrees and we started Taproot. And we've been joined at the hip ever since. That's an interesting, even though that's not for me, all the time at the theater in the way that it is for Scott. That's 2 grown kids now and taking care of a massive amount of family on top of the work that I've done for Taproot. So, but I think within that is this word that's calling. And I think that is the big, sorry, that one, I think that's the big question. I know I certainly hope to continue to act. That is part of who I am and what I do. I trust that in some capacity I will still be doing the memory care work that I have fallen in love with. Some of that for me means that program is either going to grow or it is going to decrease. And that's one of those where I honestly don't know what's going to happen there. We've had many programs through the years at Taproot that grew for a time, and then that time passed and that program ended. So some of that is not within my knowledge at that point, but I can't do it all. I do want to take some time to be able to go see the redwoods or go do the national parks, some of those things that, we just have not had the luxury of being able to schedule time that's the same for the 2 of us now that the kids are grown, where what all of us look for is those moments when we go, let's just spur the moment, decide to do something. That's not been a luxury that we've ever had. And so we're looking forward to that. But what that's going to be as far as just, it's not going to be, oh, it's so great to do nothing. It's just not who either one of us are. And yet doing a little bit of nothing 44 years later, with 2 years beyond that was college. That sounds really good, to not be waking up with what's the crisis of the day. And part of life, let's face it, part of life is waking up with what's the crisis of the day. We've got Scott's mom who is failing in health right now. We could say I can say what I want to do. This week I'll be giving care to his mom for 3 days this week. And that's a privilege to be able to do that. So none of us know what tomorrow will bring. I know I hope to continue doing theater in some capacity. I would love to continue teaching. My theater degree was coupled with an education degree, and being a teacher is part of who I am as well. So what that looks like as time goes on, time will show us.
Thank you.
Thank you. A little bit.
Yep, excellent.
One more question, hang on just a second. You know what, I could have just asked Jerome to pass down the mic now that I'm thinking about it. Oh well.
So Pam, as a follow-up, is this the longest that you and Scott have been separated while he was off walking around in Spain?
You know what, I'm going to give a crazy answer, and only the actors in the room immediately will know what I'm talking about. It was heaven.
My follow-up was,
It was yes. First answer was
I
yes.
think-
Second answer.
I think the longest before that was probably 3 weeks, when he was teaching in Spain. And we had some good long gaps, and the kids were little at that time, so that felt a lot longer.
my follow-up was, did you have your...
The 6 weeks is, the kind of work that this particular actor does is as many hours of work out of the rehearsal room as it is in the rehearsal room. And it's a luxury to have time without a whole lot of family responsibilities to be able to actually put into the craft. That's why a lot of the theater people don't stay married for.
Did you indulge in some of your own spiritual reflection while he was out of the picture, so to speak?
you know, because I was in rehearsal at that time, I did get up to Orcas Island for about 3 days, and that's about how much time I had. But we operate differently that way. I am the introvert of the two, surprise, surprise. And so my morning quiet time is something that is incredibly important to me. So that journeying is different than the pace that this one has to run at. And you know, I think part of that partnership of as many years as we've been married is, you know, when I said I think it's time for you to do it, Scott, you know, I could see the great clouds forming. He desperately needed a break and some time to just process that he just didn't have the same privilege that I have. And part of that's just different natures, different personalities. But yeah, so it was a blessing for me to be able to say, go. And then I said, because we have a Capital One card, and whenever you can use your Capital One card, I'm going to be on the computer every day canceling out everything that I can with our travel rewards. So, because you know, this even a cheap trip, you know, that's a big commitment as we're looking at trying to go at some point. We would really like to not have to work full time. And we assume we'll still be working in some capacities. But yeah, so we teamed that whole time. He would, because people might enjoy watching it, the individual that did the video.
Yeah, because there is a Cuban American guy who hiked this 2 years before me.
Almost the
Catherine,
identical.
and I can't remember his last name, but he has a YouTube channel and almost the identical trip. So he filmed going from St. Jean to Roncesvalles to
So with
Logroño to Pamplona.
With the time change, I was able, when he was asleep, he would wake up and I then would have watched on this particular YouTube channel what he was just finishing. So that allowed us to stay connected in a really sweet way. And, you know, I could ask him about it and, you know, I'd know if it would probably be a really hard day, you know, but, yeah, so we stayed close in, you know, an interesting way that way. And I ate, I think, 1 pot of soup for about a month. Which, you know, for me, it's heaven. I don't have to cook. My script is here. You know, I wouldn't want to live that way. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, it was a quick 6 weeks for me. You know, I was very, very busy. So.
And actually, the miracle of technology was that I was in one town, and I got permission to stay up past lights out, and they're really, really rigid lights out. I mean, literally, click, everything goes dark. But I could stay up late so I could FaceTime back to my dad on Father's Day. And my dad's health had been touch and go, like rolling 3 months for the last couple of years. So when I left town, I wasn't sure whether I would see him again. So to FaceTime to him back here and say, "Hey Dad, how's it going?" And I don't think he ever really figured out how I was talking to him. He was looking around. I'm over here, Dad. But I could visit with Dad and say Happy Father's Day. And I think I texted to you every couple days.
Phone calls.
And with
I love the old days.
T-Mobile, I was able to call back, you know, once or twice a week as I needed to as well.
That's good.
I even saw an audition. I had lost an actor for Baskerville. And so that Karen auditioned the guy for me, and Mark compressed the video so that I could then try to find a bar with enough Wi-Fi that I could try to download 2 auditions and then try to cast a show. Any more questions? Otherwise, it's like recess. Over here.
What are your kids up to?
What are the kids up to? Peter is a beekeeper, and you will find him and his wife at the Shoreline Farmers Market and at the University Farmers Market and online. Rainy Day Bees. Should you want to buy anything when you leave tonight. And our daughter Lisa lives down by SeaTac Airport, and she works at Endeline Joe's restaurant in West Seattle. So they're both in town, which is really nice, just either end of Seattle, but fortunately they're both right here. Over there on the wall, the couple sheets that are hanging on diagonals, those are actually sort of like my closing reflections, so that if you want it, I only printed out 3. But I think my blog is on the bottom of one of those. So it was like my closing. Here's like the 7 things I learned. So those are there. On the wall there is my calendar in terms of where I hiked and the projected mileage or kilometerage.
One more question.
Right down here in the front row. Yes.
Was there ever a consideration of you going together on this journey?
If you knew how many times I passed out in the heat, you know, and the 40 beds and the bed bugs and the rain and the cold, the beginning of the trip, you know, there is one of them. I mean, the Norte in a different season, we may do together, but you know, when in this particular moment in time, I don't do well in the heat. So we're about as opposite as a couple can be in that way. He calls me a northern cave dweller.
Damn cave dweller.
But it was wonderful to be able to support him in doing it.
Thank you for all you've done.
Yes, I thank you also for the many things you've done for the community and for the theater. I've enjoyed it over the years, and I moved to Seattle in 1991. So, I would love it if you just kind of give us a thumbnail sketch of the 7 things you learned. If you feel it's too much, I certainly would understand, but I had to ask.
Let me grab my notes. Let me see. So one of them was learning how to balance solitude and community. So when to be alone and when to be part of a group. When you're on the Camino, it is difficult, but you must establish a new normal. My normal is this sort of long day, this is what I do, no matter what the weather is, this is what I do. Adapting to new realities, which in some cases included, like I said, hurt my foot, on and on. I grasped the illogical value of small affirmations. And there was a Frenchman who was in my room in one town and spoke Zippo English. And we ended up like in each other's, I was in his bunk and he was, so we kind of looked at each other and said, well, do you want to just sort of, no, we're fine. And so, but I saw him daily for like another 2.5 weeks. And I never hiked with him, but I'd see him and I buen camino, which means good way, basically. Yeah. So I'd yell to him and he'd look around like, who yelled at me? And he'd see me, he'd wave. And I just did that every time I saw him. And Melissa from Argentina said, you are friendly with everybody. And I said, well, it's the only thing I can do. I don't speak French, and he's hiking by himself. And nobody notices. And so that, I said, that's what I can do for him. We got all the way to Santiago de Compostela, and I was staying in this hostel hotel sort of thing. And I think I don't know what I was doing, but he came over to me with a woman who evidently was his wife and started talking to me. I had no idea what he was talking about. And Melissa said, oh, he's introducing himself, and he wants you to meet his wife. Really? And so this was a clear exchange of names and a hug and off he went. And that was like one isolated thing that you really don't know the depth of value, what it might mean to someone just to be acknowledged, to be noticed on the track.
Well,
I never saw him with anybody else either.
If I may, because I didn't know what Scott was going to talk about tonight until he started talking. One of the things that I do love about basically the parallels that he's talking about is every single one of you in this room is Scott doing this to the other individuals in this city, in the schools, walking into the theater. There's a sense and a spirit of welcome at Taproot Theater Company that is palpable to people walking in, and we hear that from people. And that is because of all of you extending that spirit of welcome. It is our staff, it is our board members, but it's all of you. And Scott, you might want to talk about what our friend John was saying about noticing.
We have a friend he was a theater critic. He's a theater critic who noticed people in our audience helping somebody else find out where things are. So the spirit of hospitality that also exists among the Taproot theater patrons. So helping someone to know where the dramaturg board is, is this the first time you're here? There's a tremendous spirit of welcome that is unique to us that he didn't see in other theaters. And he was reviewing everybody in town, and he was just astounded that that's how we behaved. My last couple of things, watch for arrows. Are you ready for tomorrow? There's so much prep. When you go to bed at night, do I have a sandwich for tomorrow? Have I bought a bottle of water? Are my socks dry yet? All this sort of stuff. Persevere, which is on the board there too. And my last one was accept and respect your fellow peregrinos. There was a guy that I saw several times over the course of 3 weeks, and he wore like sweatpants and like running shoes, and he had a t-shirt, and he had like a duffel bag on his back and a plastic sack that was like a water bottle and his lunch. And I had a space age pack that buckles here and it's here and it's all tight so it doesn't jostle around your back. His was like swinging side to side, and he's always red faced. And I just, oh dear Lord, we're going to pick him up someday. And he made it all the way. He made it all the way. And there was just, I was thinking about the fact that I don't know his story. I don't know why he's here. I don't know why he's hiking with a duffel bag on his back. But he's doing the same thing every day that I am. And so how can I extend respect and validation to him and whatever his journey is, and not find myself assessing whether he's healthy enough or equipped well. So those are some of the rough things I became sort of life lessons. And I walk back and I think we could all do a better job of that.
Thank you so much.
I think we're about there. So, hey, board members, could you raise your hands one more time? Just wave. So if you would like to, touch base with one of our board members, there they are. Otherwise, come on down. Nice to meet you again. Thank you for coming tonight. We do appreciate your time and your interest, and we'll see you at the next show. All right.
We're here if you have individual questions.
Or if you want to take your picture with Scott and Pam.
If you want to try on my sack, it's really cool.